I can only say thank you with all my heart to all who made this possible for me. Thank you.
She was one of the most beautiful and successful women Hollywood had ever created. An Oscar winner, a star who worked with Alfred Hitchcock himself, a woman whose face defined an entire era of American glamour, the kind of face that made grown men in the audience go quiet. And then, at the height of it all, she walked away. No scandal forced her out. No studio dropped her. No career collapse pushed her toward the exit. She left on her own terms, at 26 years old, to marry a man who ruled a tiny principality most Americans couldn't find on a map. Think about that for a second. Right now, at this exact point in her life, Grace Kelly had everything the world tells you to want: fame, wealth, beauty, respect, and Academy Awards sitting on her shelf, directors lining up to work with her. And she gave it up? So why would a woman who had conquered Hollywood give it all up? Why trade a golden career, one she had fought for and finally earned for a foreign crown in a country of barely 30,000 people? The answer isn't as simple as a fairy tale, and by the end of this story, you'll understand why her choice was so much more complicated than the headlines ever let on. Grace Kelly wasn't born into struggle. She came from a wealthy, accomplished Philadelphia family. The kind of family whose name already meant something before she ever stepped in front of a camera. Her father, Jack Kelly, had been an Olympic rowing champion, a self-made construction millionaire, and a man who ran for mayor of Philadelphia. Her uncle wrote plays for Broadway. By every measure, the Kellys had already made their mark in America. Grace grew up surrounded by expectation, comfort, and a certain kind of old money discipline. But Grace wanted something her family didn't fully understand, and something her father in particular never quite respected. She wanted to act. In the Kelly household, acting wasn't seen as a serious ambition. It was considered frivolous, even a little embarrassing for a daughter of their standing. And that ambition wasn't handed to her because of the family name. If anything, it worked against her. She left home for New York at 18, enrolled at the American Academy of Dramatic Arts, and took modeling jobs to pay her bills, appearing in magazine ads and department store catalogs just to stay afloat. She auditioned for Broadway. She waited in hallways. She got rejected more than once. Becoming a star wasn't the smooth, inevitable rise it looks like in hindsight. It was work. It was rent money, and it was years of uncertainty before anyone outside a casting office knew her name. But that uncertainty didn't last long. By the early 1950s, something about Grace Kelly stood out. She wasn't like the era's typical bombshells, the kind Hollywood was mass-producing at the time. She carried herself with a cool, composed elegance. Controlled, graceful, almost untouchable. As if she belonged somewhere just slightly above the room she was standing in. Directors noticed, audiences noticed. Her early films, including 14 Hours and High Noon, gave her small but memorable roles that hinted at what she could become. And soon, one of the most demanding directors in Hollywood noticed too. Alfred Hitchcock became fascinated with Grace Kelly. He saw in her something rare. Beauty with restraint, sensuality hidden beneath poise, a stillness that made the camera lean in closer. Hitchcock had a particular obsession with what he called the cool blonde, a woman who looked untouchable on the surface, but hinted at something far more dangerous underneath. Grace fit that vision perfectly. He cast her in Dial-M for Murder in 1954, where she played a woman fighting for her own survival with icy composure. Then came Rear Window, opposite James Stewart, where her elegance practically lit up the screen against the claustrophobic tension of the story. Then To Catch a Thief, filmed on the sun-soaked French Riviera opposite Cary Grant, a film that, without anyone realizing it at the time, was quietly rehearsing the very world she would soon step into for real. Each film built her reputation as Hollywood's ultimate icon of sophistication, a woman who didn't need to raise her voice to command a room. Hitchcock later said he was drawn to her because she seemed to promise more than she ever revealed. Audiences felt the same pull. In just a few short years, Grace Kelly had gone from an unknown model auditioning in empty New York hallways to one of the most sought-after actresses in the world. But what happened next changed everything. In 1955, Grace won the Academy Award for Best Actress, not for playing a glamorous socialite, but for a raw, unglamorous role in The Country Girl, where she played the exhausted, embittered wife of an alcoholic performer. She stripped away the makeup, the elegance, the polish audiences expected, and disappeared into a role that had nothing to do with beauty. She proved she could act, not just look extraordinary on camera. That Oscar meant something far bigger than a trophy. It meant Hollywood no longer saw her as just a face. She had become one of its most respected talents, standing on stage as proof that she belonged there on merit, not just glamour. And that's what makes what happened next so hard to believe. If Hollywood was finally giving Grace Kelly everything she had worked for, why would she walk away from it? The answer began, of all places, at the Cannes Film Festival in the spring of 1955. Grace was there promoting a film when a French magazine arranged a photo shoot for her at the Palace of Monaco, pairing the American movie star with the country's young, unmarried ruler for a publicity opportunity neither of them thought would amount to much. That's where she met Prince Rainier III, the ruler of a small principality on the French Riviera. It wasn't love at first sight in the way people like to imagine. In fact, the meeting itself was almost rushed and awkward. A power outage delayed it. Gardens had to be toured quickly, and neither of them left with any grand sense that they'd just met their future spouse. Their courtship developed slowly afterward, largely through letters exchanged across the Atlantic, as Rainier weighed whether Grace could fulfill the role Monaco required of its future princess. Reports at the time suggest his family and advisors even looked into whether she could have children, treating the match less like romance and more like a matter of state. It was less a whirlwind fairy tale and more a careful, deliberate negotiation between two very different worlds, each with something the other needed. Hollywood's golden girl, and the ruler of a principality smaller than New York's Central Park, a country so small it could fit inside a mid-sized American town, yet one with a royal bloodline stretching back centuries. But the contrast only made the public more obsessed. When their engagement was announced at the end of 1955, it became a global sensation. Newspapers couldn't get enough. Magazines ran cover after cover. This wasn't just a celebrity wedding. It was being called the marriage of the century, a real-life union between American stardom and European royalty, the kind of story that felt almost too perfect to be true. Then came the decision that shocked Hollywood. Grace Kelly was only 26 when she married Prince Rainier III in April 1956, in a wedding so massive it was broadcast to an estimated 30 million viewers around the world. And with that marriage, she gave up everything Hollywood had built for her. No more film roles, no more studio contracts, no more the career she had clawed her way toward since those early rejected auditions in New York. High Society, a lighthearted musical released that same year, would be her final film, a fitting, almost symbolic farewell, since it was itself a story about a wealthy woman choosing between different versions of her own life. Think about what that decision actually meant. She wasn't retiring after a long career, fading gracefully out of the spotlight the way aging stars often do. She was leaving at the absolute peak of her power, an Oscar winner, a Hitchcock favorite, one of the most bankable actresses alive, walking away from a career many actresses would have given anything for, in exchange for a life she had never actually lived yet, in a country she barely knew, speaking a language she was still learning. The fairy tale, however, had another side. Becoming Princess of Monaco wasn't simply about glamour and palaces. Grace had to adapt to an entirely new identity, one bound by duty rather than personal ambition. She converted. She studied French formally. She learned centuries of royal protocol that had nothing to do with anything she'd trained for as an actress. She became a mother to 3 children, Caroline, Albert, and Stephanie, raising them under a level of public scrutiny few parents could imagine. She took on official responsibilities, charity work, and the constant weight of representing an entire nation. Now not as an actress playing a role on a soundstage, but as a real princess whose every appearance carried consequence. And there was something nobody could have predicted about how much she missed her old life. She missed acting. Reports and biographers suggest she considered returning to film more than once over the years, even quietly discussing a possible project with Hitchcock himself in the early 1960s. But the idea reportedly met resistance in Monaco, where many felt it wasn't fitting for their princess to appear on screen again, playing pretend roles for the world to watch. So the offers, when they came, were gently set aside. The life she chose came with real sacrifice, not just royal comfort, a trade she made once at 26 and then lived with for the rest of her life. For over 25 years, Grace Kelly lived as Princess Grace of Monaco, elegant, dutiful, and largely removed from the Hollywood world that had made her famous. She became known instead for her charitable work, her devotion to the arts, and the quiet grace with which she carried an identity she'd essentially built from scratch. But nobody could have predicted how her story would end. In September 1982, Grace was driving on a winding mountain road in Monaco with her younger daughter, Stephanie, when the car went off the road and crashed down a steep embankment. She suffered severe injuries, including a brain hemorrhage she had likely experienced just before the crash, and she died the following day without ever fully regaining consciousness. She was only 52 years old. The woman who once seemed almost untouchable on the silver screen, poised, graceful, always in complete control of every scene she was in, was suddenly, irreversibly gone. It felt impossible. Grace Kelly had spent her life as a symbol of composure and elegance, someone the camera had never once caught off guard, and her death arrived with none of that control. It was sudden, it was public, and it was final. So why did she leave Hollywood? We may never know exactly what was in her heart the day she chose Monaco over a movie career. Maybe it was love. Maybe it was the pull toward a different kind of purpose, one that had nothing to do with scripts or cameras. Maybe it was simply a decision only she could fully explain, one she made privately and never fully unpacked for the public, even decades later. What we do know is what she left behind, and what she became instead. She didn't just become a Hollywood legend, frozen at her peak the way so many stars who left the spotlight are remembered. She became a princess, a mother, and a public figure who carried the weight of an entire country, and she remained, through all of it, one of the most recognizable women of the 20th century, decades after her final film had wrapped and the cameras had stopped rolling. Hollywood gave Grace Kelly a star, Monaco gave her a crown, but history gave her something neither could buy, the kind of legacy that never fades.